Bear Hug Club, a pro wrestling podcast of positivity.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Bear Hug Club podcast. My name is Greg and as always I'm joined by my boo Garrod.
Hello baby boo.
And I'm joined by my other boo Jace.
How's it going, life partner?
It's going well, life partner. So, a few quick things before we get into today's episode. So, you may have noticed at the start of the episode there, we now have intro music, and it's pretty kick-ass. So,
unless we didn't, in which case you will you yourself will record a jingle, only by your voice. So it was either you doing a little voice jingle, or it was an actual jingle for the pod.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good thing you brought that up because, I mean, I've been going backwards and forward with my friend William over this track. Essentially, if it does work, hopefully there's no tech issues. William played all the music on it, it's really good, and then I was meant to record the opening line, and for whatever reason, the file kept fucking up, so it's William's voice you'll hear on the opening intro, so hopefully it will work, and hopefully it'll be on this episode, you do get to hear it. But big thank you to William Corley, he's an old friend of mine, a very skilled musician. If you want to go check him out, he's got a Spotify for his band, Late Night Brain Freeze. Really good band, so please show him a bit of love and go check out his songs and give him a bit of support there, because he is a really good musician, so thanks again, William.
What a class band name, Late Night Brain Freeze.
I know,
so
right?
Good.
It's really good. He's had a few different bands, but I think that's the best name he's ever had for one. It's a really good name, so props to him for that one. Before we get into anything else there, obviously we've got our social media feed, so if you want to check us out on Facebook, we're at the Bear Hug Club Podcast. You can check us on Instagram at Bear Hug Pod, Bear Hug Club for Twitter, and we also now have a YouTube channel set up where I've been very slowly adding all the episodes of the pod, and as well you'll find highlight versions on there as well. So at the moment I've done every edition of Matches You Need to See so far. I will be getting to the rest, it's just obviously quite a long process, but if you want to go check us out on there you can. Other than that, we'll get you in the episode, but the first thing we want to bring up is right before we started recording, it was announced that Pat Patterson sadly passed away. Age of 79, so he did live a ripe old age, and we just wanted to kind of do a bit of discussion about him. What are your thoughts on it, lads?
Heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. It's like such a legend of the industry, first Intercontinental Champion, Vince's right hand for however many years, been there, seen it all, and just one of them. Just like I said in our group message, like it was like an RKO. It was out of nowhere.
Yeah, he's one of those people that you can point to that has changed the landscape and was such a brain in wrestling. Like he's like a Dusty or he's one of these people that has inspired so many, and not only just professionally but even just socially. Him obviously being one of the first, if not, I don't know if he was the first openly gay wrestler. But yeah, what a tragic loss, but a wonderful person to share the ring with so many people and to share his knowledge.
Yeah, no, absolutely, guys. I mean, like you were saying there, it's hard to say whether he was like truly the first, but I think he was probably one of the first sort of like big names to kind of come out as being openly gay. And again, I mean, he's been wrestling, I think, basically since like the late 50s, so he was kind of openly gay through a lot of the heavy periods where it was still heavily persecuted against. I think we all kind of knew who he was, but I only really got to full grips with him when his book came out a couple of years ago. If you want to check it out, it's called Accepted: How the First Gay Superstar Changed WWE. It's a really good read as well. It's one of those interesting biographies. You'd think for a guy with his long career it would be quite a big book, but it's actually like kind of like the perfect length. It just kind of keeps things nice and concise, going over some of his like favorite things throughout his career. Because like we were saying there, it's not just the fact he was a skilled in-ring worker. I mean, he was the creative mind behind the Royal Rumble. Incredibly instrumental as well for bringing in some of like the biggest names linked to wrestling. Like he's famously the guy who helped bring The Rock in and sign The Rock. So potentially without Pat Patterson, there wouldn't be a Rock, you know? So absolutely, he's just one of those figures that I think will leave like a tragic... It's a tragic loss. There'll be a big hole left, but he did leave one hell of a mark on the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So R.I.P. Pat. Great. So moving on to this week's episode, we're doing things a little differently this week. So kind of following on from last week after Garrod's very passionate discussion about tag team wrestling, we kind of figured, well, why don't we just talk about our favourite tag team matches? So this week we've all picked our top 5 and we're going to kind of run through them with you. So essentially what we'll do, we'll just start at number 5 and we'll keep going around the room until we reach number 1. I think that, like we were saying before recording, I think there's going to be 1 or 2 matches that might overlap here, but I think generally we might have picked quite a nice variety, so I don't think there's going to be too much in the way of things kind of being brought up like too much. But before we get started, lads, have you got any kind of honourable mentions?
See, I try to keep my honourable mentions just down to a 1, just so because we could have went forever.
Yeah.
Saying honourable mentions. So mine is The Shield versus Goldust and Cody Rhodes, with Dusty's career on the line. I'm not sure what it was on an episode of Raw. I'm not sure which episode.
I'm afraid that's actually in my list. That made it onto my list.
In your list.
That's in my list, yeah.
Yeah.
So of course we're no longer friends. That is your honourable mentions. That's your guilty pleasure, I suppose. But that's quite high on my list.
Well, I've championed that match since the first time I saw it. I actually remember Greg, you were in London when this match happened, and I told you, watch this match because it was so good.
And I totally did.
Well, tell you what,
Totally
you and I'll basically let you have a surrogate extra one on the list when I get to my my version of it. Then I suppose.
I mean, I'm sure you'll both bring it up in a bit of deal when Garrod gets to discuss it. But yeah, Garrod, did you have any honourable mentions?
So I do have a few honourable mentions. I have Mustache Mountain against Grizzled Young Vets. They're just 2 amazing teams that have had some cracking matches. Pretty much any match either of the 2 teams have with anyone are great, but when you put the 2 together, amazing. Another one is Mustache Mountain against Undisputed Era, which I think was the first 5-star tag match that Meltzer gave to WWE.
Garrod, spoilers.
Spoilers. See, there you go. That's the problem. That all of these matches, the cream rises to the top.
It does.
But one is one that you and I watched live. It was David Starr and who was his partner? The story of the match was David Starr versus Walter. It was because it was before Super Strong Style 16.
It was before the Ali Pali show we went to, which was Chasing the Sun. It was just a big Ali Pali show they were doing.
But it was also because it was building for those 2, and it was also building for their what's the smaller one that Progress do? The the up and coming one.
Crud. Natural Progression series, I think.
So it was. They had their sort of proteges, the ones that they put in for the Natural Progression series. I think it was David Starr and OJMO against Walter, and it would have been his pick, but I think he couldn't make it, so they brought in. I can't remember the man's name, but he came in from. I believe it was a Japanese wrestler that came in.
Yeah.
Anyway, match was amazing. I'm not putting it on the list because of current allegations against David Starr. But at the time, what a brilliant match.
No, absolutely. And I remember we were there live. I think I was absolutely hammered by the time that one came on, but I do remember it being a really good match.
You were definitely hammered, yeah.
Yeah, that's just the standard thing when I go to wrestling. By the start of the show, I can remember everything very clearly, and then by the end, it's kind of a blur. But it means it was a good show either way.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I've got quite a few honourable mentions, but I'll just kind of fly through them. I won't say much about them. I'll just quickly fly through them because I imagine some of these might come up on either of your lists. So I had Aussie Open versus the Swords of Essex, which was a TLC match from Progress Chapter 87. I had the Young Bucks versus Hangman and Omega from AEW Revolution 2020. British Strong Style versus Ring Camp from Chapter 47 of Progress. The Young Bucks versus FTR from AEW Full Gear this year. The Two-Man Power Trip versus Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit from Raw. The Young Bucks versus the Golden Lovers from New Japan Strong Style Evolved. Mustache Mountain versus Grizzled Young Veterans from NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool. And this one was just... I would have wanted to add this to the list, but I feel like this could be like its own separate list. So Team WWE versus Team Alliance from Survivor Series 2001. Cracking. So... Yeah. That was the thing. Like, I think we could have easily done a top 10, but then this would have been an epically long video, so we're just kind of keeping it to the 5. Who would like to start us off?
I think Garrod should have, because he was the one who brought about this.
Yeah, Garrod, come on.
Yeah, go on then. All right, so to be honest, most of my picks have already been mentioned on either people's honorable mentions or ones that I'm pretty sure we just all have on our lists. At number 5, and I'm sure people will not like that it's a number 5, but it's Revival versus DIY at TakeOver Toronto, and I'm sure all 3 of us have a lot to say about this. If we don't, do we all have this one?
We do, but like I was saying, if we just kind of keep it to ourselves till it comes up, and we'll just say bits as we kind of go through it. So it's up to you if you want to go all the discussion out now, or if you want to save a bit for when.
I'll throw the discussion to the team then.
Okay.
We can we'll group discuss it.
All right, no worry. Go ahead.
I mean, the Revival are one of the greatest teams, in the world. They're such a pure tag team. Obviously, people hearken them back to the ways of yore. No flips, just fists and whatnot. But really, it's how they can highlight another team that can do those things. That does those things. Like DIY. DIY used to be a bit flashy, when they were together. But just what a match this was, and you can see it in the crowd. Part of the reason that wrestling can be a bit of a slog to watch now is that, unfortunately, due to circumstances, we don't have crowds. But the way that these two teams play the crowd and have you ready and believing in a fall, and have you the way that the Revival get heat, the way that DIY play their comebacks, it's tremendous.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just at the time, 2 of the best teams in the world. Obviously, Revival now, FTR, still one of the best teams in the world. And I'm glad, I think maybe from that is where Ciampa and Gargano got their singles pushes, because of those matches they had with the Revival. So I think every member of that match has just gone from strength to strength. Obviously, the Revival took a bit of a dip on Raw, but then have just gone above and beyond everything now that they've left WWE.
Yeah, agree. I think it's like, as you mentioned there, the thing is, like, before this match, and certainly this feud, like, DIY, both its members had been on the NXT roster for a while and were just kind of doing nothing, really. They were kind of names no one really associated with the brand, and then because of particularly this feud, their tag title run, and then obviously the aftermath of that, they're now pretty much the main faces of NXT and have probably been up there as some of its longest serving roster members as well. And then
yeah. I mean, Gargano is now Mr. Takeover. He's been on more than any other.
Yeah, exactly, and like he's always the one who like delivers. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, he's like basically delivered isn't it like at least 2 5-star matches with NXT now?
I think it's more than that now.
Yeah, it was like, but he did like 2 back-to-back that were, because I think he had the one with Andrade and then obviously the one with him and Ciampa not long after that. So it was like quite a few in succession. So it kind of just shows the stock people can have if they can easily go from like not essentially nobodies, but not people like didn't like have any kind of eye on, and then now all of a sudden they're like basically the face of the brand. But yeah, as you mentioned there, the Revival, that are probably my favorite tag team, especially like in the current age. They just really are two guys passionate about tag team wrestling. Especially, did you guys ever listen to Jericho's podcast when they like finally like showed up in AEW?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the fact when you hear them speak, it like for them it wasn't just about, you know, winning titles. They just wanted to see a good tag division in WWE, which is why they eventually just left. Like, because they were basically saying, "We'll give you the belts," and like, we don't want them if they're effectively worthless. We want to see a stronger tag division. So they're like a team that just live and breathe tag team wrestling.
Mm-hmm. What's crazy as well is that they didn't come into the WWE together, did they? They were put together when they arrived, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think they kind of go into that on the Jericho podcast a bit. I think they did know each other on the Indies, but they weren't a tag team effectively. It was because of they were just thrown together because again they were kind of two names that again were just kind of there in NXT. They weren't doing much, and then they were just kind of put together, and then the rest is history, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just a case of excellence finding excellence, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll bring up more about this match as we kind of go through, because I know for a fact, I think me and Jace have both got it as well. But Jace, do you want to take us through number 5?
My number 5 is The Shield versus Evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, which
Fair
one?
enough.
I think I can't remember the event, but it's not the elimination match, just the standard 3-on-3 6-man tag. And it was just so good because the Shield were, at the time for me, were almost at that upper echelon. They just hadn't had that final kick to get them up there, and then beating Evolution clean with what looked like relative ease, just pushed them there. And then obviously it wasn't long after that where old Sethy Rollins did the hitting them with the chairs, which I think was brilliant, planned or not. But yeah, just a brilliant match. Just showing Triple H's belief in those three guys, to put them over, not just put them over as himself, but one of the most dominating stables ever to have been in WWE.
No, I agree, Jason. No, was it after this match that you picked when it's the next night on Raw that Seth betrays them? Or was it the match after this one?
It was the match after that one.
After that one, okay. Because this is like just following Mania, because this is obviously was meant to be Batista's big return, and it got absolutely shot on because people wanted Daniel Bryan. Rightfully so.
Yeah. Blue Teaster,
exactly. I don't think I've actually seen this one that you've mentioned, because again, this is when I was probably at London, and it was just before, because I remember that because it was WrestleMania 30 when the network launched in America, and it was a good few months until it arrived in the UK, so it was hard to kind of watch stuff while I was at uni. But I do remember the kind of feud and angle going on around that time. Cool. Anything you want to mention on that, Garrod?
I'll gush on the Shield for a long while. I think they were such a quality team. It's before how many reformings did they have after that? I suppose.
It got very convoluted because of injuries and stuff.
Yeah, when their first run, just very underrated, I'd say. I mean, I have one of their matches on my list, in fact.
Ooh, me too. Me too.
Well, if you like the Shield, you're gonna like my list.
I'm willing to bet we might have a shared one here. Shall I go into my number 5?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
So my number 5 is The Shield versus the Wyatt family from Elimination Chamber 2014.
Nice.
It's one of those matches because at the time it was basically the first time that these two essentially the biggest factions and the hottest stars on the brand clash for the first time. And obviously there was a bit of hype going on. I mean, the Shield had been around for at least well over a full year before this match, and the Wyatts, I think the Wyatts had only debuted a couple of months prior as well, so the big thing was, when are they going to finally clash, and they did. And it more than lives up to the hype. Like, both teams just go hell for leather throughout the whole thing, and it's just an amazing showing. And I mean, it's just kind of mind-blowing looking at these two teams, and the fact with an unfortunate exception of Eric Rowan, all the other five have gone and become essentially main event players within wrestling. All of the Shield have won the WWE title, and they're all like world champions now. Bray Wyatt has been, and even like Luke Harper now. Obviously, Brody Lee is like a big player on AEW, and it's just a terrific match throughout. One thing because I rewatched it for this, is I forgot how agile and flippy Seth Rollins used to be. He seems to have kind of toned a lot of his like original moveset down compared to like when he first debuted.
Yeah, I think part of that, because he could always do it.
Yeah.
But I think part of that was just they maybe saw a part of the Shield's offense that they wanted to. They obviously had Reigns as the powerhouse, and then why not put a high flyer there as well?
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree, and it's crazy to watch this as well, because you forget. Well, we kind of brought it up on a couple episodes ago when we talked about Roman, but like how over Roman is when he was with the Shield and debuted. Like, he gets some like big pops in this match, and it's kind of just mind-boggling to think that when they split up, he just became the most booed man on the roster. But it's just kind of nice to see, because he's kind of at that level again now where he is just getting such a huge reaction. Well, it's hard to gauge given the fans aren't there, but I imagine if they were, he's probably would be getting cheered by them.
Yeah, the MP4s of the fans in the background, they seem like they're giving him a big reaction.
Yeah, the audio loves him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Roman, he gets a lot of stick, but he's good at his job, and especially now. I think once the fans get back there, I think Greg's right. I think we're going to be getting similar reactions.
Yeah,
as he was in the original Shield.
Yeah, it's very difficult to gauge while they don't have fans, because all we have to go on is just the vitriol that is Instagram comments or Twitter threads or whatever about it, and like that's just not going to be the wide wrestling audience. I'm almost certain that when people come back, Roman is probably going to be one of the most over. Well, okay, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but he'll be pretty over.
Yeah.
And I think people are really going to dig where he's going with the character. Hopefully, we get fans back during this run.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what's mind blowing about this match. Like, this is a match that is sort of tailor made for like a big car, like on one of the main like big shows. So given that I believe it would have been this pay-per-view and then afterwards would have been WrestleMania, can you remember who the Shield fought at WrestleMania 30?
It was Daniel Bryan, Big Show and Ryback.
No, not according to the article I've got in front of me. It was Kane and the New Age Outlaws in a match that lasted just under 3 minutes. Like, they could have easily just kept this. I think actually, I can see why, because it was WrestleMania 30 where Wyatt fought Cena, so that makes a little bit of sense, but given how that match panned out, I don't know. But no, a brilliant six-man tag match. Again, this was at a time when the tag division was starting to dip down, but at least you had these two teams that were really kind of holding it up in their own way, and they were just always enthralling to watch. You never knew what was going to happen, so really good match. Garrod, your number 4, please.
Coming in at number 4 is another formerly the Revival, currently FTR match. It is the Revival versus American Alpha at NXT TakeOver Dallas.
Good choice.
This is where American Alpha win the NXT Tag Team titles. I think what the Revival are great at is being the heel champions that the baby faces win against. Because American Alpha, if you just watch any of their work, they're some of the greatest baby faces in the way that they wrestle. Like, if you watch any of American Alpha's work, you just know how good of baby faces they are. And the obvious comparison, and the one that people will still and always will compare them to, is Kurt Angle. and it's so apparent here. Obviously, you know, I believe they're both collegiate wrestlers. I know that Gable is. I'm pretty sure that Jason Jordan is. And if he isn't, he wrestles like one. They were just pure babyface. There was a point in the match where they both hit. But both the teams sort of go through. It was about maybe 4 minutes into the match. Revival are taunting them. They're just taking the piss out of them, and then it all comes to a head as they sort of square off in the middle. They're all four in the ring. The ref is like pushing them apart, and they grab both of them for a simultaneous German, and it was just the crowd went crazy. The emotion on the face was just fucking electric. And then the second Gable gets to the outside of the ring, goes to continue the move, and the Revival just cut them off straight away there. I forget if it was Dax or Cash that did it, but God, it's just such a great match. No one else has this on their list, right?
No, surprisingly not. I remember the match that I remember watching at the time, and it's one of those crazy things to look back on now, because I remember watching this and thinking, my God, like this is like the best, two of the best teams in tag team wrestling, and if they go at the main roster, then hopefully they'll be the one to put the spotlight onto. And it's just mind blowing to see that what happened to both these two tremendous teams that would just kill it in NXT, and it's just kind of like a prime example of what happens when the people get the call to the main roster. Like, I mean, Jason Jordan's no longer wrestling now, which was obviously just kind of a tragic thing that happened. Chad Gable was stuck with Shorty G, and now he's finally transitioning out of that, and then obviously we already know what happened with the Revival, now FTR, so it's just crazy to see.
Yeah, it's always sad to see someone so over and that can garner that kind of crowd reaction and that can wrestle that well, not be utilized as they should be. I think the point of this list is just to say that tag team wrestling is just one of the best forms of wrestling. A tangent that I was going to go on, I might as well go on it now, is why Japan doesn't have as many injuries or as frequently people injured is because they do a lot of tag matches. The G1 is the most intense wrestling tournament ever, right? You know, it's a lot of matches, one after the other. But the way that it works is it's a column A and a column B. And when you're not wrestling in a singles match in column A, you're doing a tag match. So it splits the load. And I think that one of the great things about tag wrestling is you are able to split the load between two wrestlers, well, four wrestlers really. You can. It's not as strenuous as a singles match usually. Oftentimes there are tag teams where there is a guy designed to take the bumps, as is often the case in like an Enzo and Cass type tag team. For example, if me and Greg were in a tag team, me being 5'6", I'm pretty sure I'd be taking most of the bumps. But in like traditional tag teams, it allows people to sort of take a break and tell a better story. Having them on the outside just wait, be too tired to tag back in, all of this kind of stuff. But anyway, blah blah blah, tangent. American Alpha. What a great tag team, and I guess at least glad we got them for the time that we did.
No, I agree. I always hoped they would have done well on the main roster, because I remember when it was rumored they were getting called up, it was when Kurt Angle was coming back. So the big thing was, it would have been perfect if they just put Kurt as a manager role for them. Like, I think obviously there was the comparison to being the world's greatest tag team 2.0, but it's still just the perfect fit, given they all come from similar backgrounds, and Kurt wasn't looking to really properly get back in the ring. But then of course they just went with the weird story angle of Jason Jordan being his son, which I still fully don't understand. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously one of those things. If you look at the main roster run, it wasn't great, but then in NXT they were absolutely flawless. They were such a great team.
Yeah, especially a team that were brought out of nowhere. I think they only put Jason Jordan with Chad Gable because Jason Jordan was dying on his arse, and put him with Chad Gable because Gable had that charisma that he could use to boost Jason Jordan, and to go from not knowing each other to being legit one of the best tag teams in like, arguably the world
Yeah.
in such a short space of time is a testament to both of their abilities.
Yeah. I mean, even in just this match alone, you can see Jason Jordan. You know, he's not some charisma vacuum. He's not some talentless hack in any way. He's so like on it, and like just like he matches up to Gable in this match for charisma and it's why they were such a good tag team. There was not one person who kind of lagged behind, and you weren't like, oh, this guy is going to go on a singles run. You were like, this is a tag team that could be the best in the world. And I think that's why the Young Bucks are so great. It's why Revival are so great. It's why now FTR are so great, because you don't see a future single star because that's better. You see a tag team because that's as good as it can be. That's as good as a single star, if not better.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Again, like, to go from being single stars to a team you could see as being the best team in the world in, it was what, 2-3 months, is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Credit to both those guys.
No, absolutely. Credit to these teams. It's a tremendous match. Yeah, Jace, take us through your number 4, please.
My number 4 is The New Day versus the Usos, Hell in a Cell.
Oh, brilliant. That's a good one.
And I chose this one because obviously we know the New Day and the Usos could have an amazing match together with no arms, no legs and blindfolded. But add that Hell in a Cell element into there, and it was just so much more brutal than I thought it was going to be coming from these two teams. I mean, there was kendo sticks, there was tables, there was chairs, there was the steps, using the cage a lot. I think at one point Kofi Kingston got tied to the ropes and the Usos just worked on Big E. And you'd never seen that before, because I don't think we'd ever had a tag team Hell in a Cell match. It just bumped up the Hell in a Cell match, because like now you're like, oh, where can they go now?
Yeah, no, it's definitely up there as one of the most creative cell matches in my opinion. I particularly just love the bit where I can't remember which Uso it is, but the New Day basically stick him to the wall with kendo sticks. You know what I mean? Like, well, not stick them to the wall, but like pry them through the cage and like basically like trap them. I thought that was just like such a genius spot. And you're right. I mean, like, it's the thing was like, I mean, the Usos and the New Day have basically been the ones keeping the tag division alive in WWE. So it's one of those things, they've wrestled each other so many times, but typically like you don't ever really get tired of them, because they always just find a way to kind of keep it fresh and interesting. And that's exactly what this match did. Like, at this point, we'd already seen them so many times, but then when you added this element, they just really like went all out for it, and it's just like one of the better cell matches that's been in like easily the last 2 decades. Does anybody else want to say something? I'm just kind
we're all too polite.
We're all too polite.
Yeah.
Garrod, you go ahead on something.
I think the Uso New Day storyline. They've had just match after match such great chemistry. No matter who you put in there or who you even have on the outside, it's tremendous. It's led to even highlighting other stories. My favorite moment of the two of them is of the two teams is when they were servicing Kofi Kingston's story, when the New Day had to do their gauntlet match. And they'd just gone through maybe 2 or 3 teams, and then the Usos come out. They're their next challenger. Cut a promo that just says, "You've earned our respect, and Kofi's earned our respect. So we won't fight you. We're going to give you a bit of respite before your next team." And because they'd had this Hell in a Cell match, because they've been through hell, figuratively and literally, I suppose. You're able to build off of that, and that was one case where long-term and good tag team booking happened, and I'm really glad that it did, and still does. You know, they still interact and they still have sort of chemistry together and acknowledge things that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be one of those things where give it some time, it'll be looked back on as like one of the all-time great tag team feuds, especially like we're saying there, because they've basically been the two sort of teams keeping the division going and kind of keeping a good eye on it. And again, this cell match will be like one of the highlights from it. Was it this cell match where they had not long basically kind of debuted now as like the sort of Uso Penitentiary and all that? They'd kind of ditched the face paint and the whole kind of, I kind of call it the more kid-friendly look, you know what I mean? When they kind of originally started, it was more, they were like aimed at kids and could like sell merchandise towards them, and then they just kind of became a bit more grown up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it was too long, but I don't think it was like immediate.
Yeah.
Because the Uso Penitentiary started, I believe, after American Alfred debuted, because they injured Chad Gable in the tournament to crown the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. So I don't think it was too close, but I think it was less. I think it was less than 6 months afterwards.
Okay, yeah. It was still like quite early on. I think I remember, because like this is when they were, again, like they just kind of went through like the whole new genesis with the whole thing like down with day one-ish and stuff like that, where they just kind of became a bit more, I guess, heelish and a bit more serious rather than just kind of coming out doing the hacker to entertain the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
But no, yeah, absolutely, it was a brilliant match. It was a really good one. So my number 4 pick is CCK versus LAX from Progress Chapter 87 Bread Knife. This is basically the third in a series of 4 matches they had. And essentially, you could pick almost any one of those matches because they're all absolutely tremendous. If you love tag team wrestling, this is probably the one out of everyone I'd say go check out, because it just started as just like a fun, friendly contest where Progress were touring America, so they managed to get LAX at the New York show that they did, and then because that match was so well received and tore the house down, they had to get them back for another match at Chapter 80. So by that point, it was one apiece, so they got them in for this third match, and this is kind of where it more kind of develops into a story. So what was eventually be a friendly contest kind of quickly disintegrates into CCK just desperately wanting the win, and the reason why I picked it is just because this has got one of the best finishes ever, and it's not usually the kind of finish you'd associate with being good. So the match ends in a count-out finish, but the way it's orchestrated is brilliantly done. So as the match goes on, CCK is slowly just pulling out the heel tactics, and then Ortiz gets an injured knee, and as the closing moments happens, he's locked in a figure 4 by Jonathan Gresham, which then rolls out of the ring onto the floor, and Brooks basically gets Santana in the octopus hold. They basically keep those submissions on the outside right until the refs reach 7, then break the hold and just dive into the ring to get the cheap count-out victory. And the boos they get is just unreal, and what I love about it is even Jim Smallman just sounds incredibly disappointed with calling the end of the match. And I think Glenn Joseph on commentary sums it up best when he says, "This isn't The Godfather Part 3, this is bullshit." So it is just a phenomenal match. I'd say probably if you want to just see really good in-ring work, you're probably better off picking the first 2. The 4th match is fairly decent, but it's just more of like a big street fight brawl. It's the one where they get Eddie Kingston in, and then CCK were meant to have Lucky Kid, but he couldn't make it, and then in the end they got Jordan Grace to replace him. It's still pretty interesting, and it's good, and it caps off the feud well. But I think the first 3 matches are absolutely fantastic, so they're like real high recommend from me.
Yeah, Progress have really churned out some amazing wrestling, but some absolutely tremendous tag wrestling.
Yeah. I mean, Progress. I mean, given that they were the company that started off as being just strong style pro wrestling, they've just kind of adapted to like having so many great matches for so many different varieties. But tag teams, something that they've really pioneered. I mean, when you look at like the alumni of tag teams that have come through there, you're talking Mustache Mountain, Grizzled Young Veterans, CCK. They've just had some of the best teams come through their company. I think anything you want to add there, lads, or should we move on to number 3?
Move on to number 3.
No problem. Garrod, take it away.
My number 3 is the Hangman and Omega versus the Bucks match that you mentioned. This, it's a widely regarded good match, and it just holds up. I'm a big Bucks fan. I'm a big Hangman and Omega fan. I'm not usually a fan of putting two people together that aren't a tag team and having them beat a tag team, especially one as highly regarded as the Young Bucks. But them having tagged for a little while, and the story that they were telling, even up to this point, and even still now, was just absolutely tremendous. The match itself and the sort of push that they've put behind Hangman. I mean, the first thing they did obviously was have the first AEW title match to crown the first champion was Hangman versus Jericho, and him having lost that and just him trying to find a place, not really fitting in with his old group, the Elite. Teaming with Omega, not getting on as a team. It really shows, especially in the finish of the match, where it's just Hangman. Like, he is the one that wins the match. He takes one of the Bucks to the outside, does the buckshot lariat to the inside. Just, it's tremendous. It's fucking amazing tag team wrestling. Great storytelling from all of them, and definitely one of my favorite tag matches of all time.
Yeah, no, I'd probably dare say, like, I keep forgetting that match happened this year, because that was right before lockdown was just about to come into effect. But yeah, I mean, this match is probably going to top many of the favorites for this year, and it's rightfully so. I think I agree with you. I remember obviously seeing that Hangman and Page won the belts, and I thought that was kind of a weird decision because, like you say there, it just felt like a thrown together team when it's a new company. You would have thought they would have wanted to maybe cement the actual tag division with the champions first, But then I hadn't really seen them in action until I saw this match, and then I was like, oh, okay, so that makes total sense. They're like an absolutely killer team, and the match just absolutely slays. It's like easily one of the best tag matches I've seen in the last couple of years. It's just absolutely tremendous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really watch too much AEW, but I do watch the pay-per-views, and this match just, as far as a tag team match go, like, you couldn't ask for much more. And again, like Garrod, you was saying, like, I'm the same. I don't like when they just throw two people together as a tag team. But I think this is one of the times where it did work, because obviously they were both in the Elite, so they knew each other. They had that chemistry.
Yeah.
And then they had the added thing of knowing the Bucks, knowing how the Bucks are going to approach the match, what they're going to try and do.
Yeah.
So they could have played that psychological side of it as well, which I think works, as just throwing them together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's an absolutely cracking match. Not to spoil anything, but have we got the other match from this year potentially showing up on someone's list with FTR?
Is actually not on my list.
Okay.
Not on my list.
Would you say this one was better than the one with FTR? Because I'm kind of torn between the two.
I think obviously all of these lists just come down to personal preference. Like,
yeah.
My number 2 will probably be nowhere near anyone's top 5 ever, but I didn't. For me, I think that the FTR Bucks match is the kind of thing that will lead to an even greater story down the line. I feel like their match eventually, because they must have another match, they must have a series. I feel like the match eventually, because they are so good and now they have agency over what they do, I think it will lead to probably my favorite tag match of all time. And I know that's a pre-prediction, but when you're talking the Revival and you're talking the Bucks, people were able to tell a story without even being in the same company, it's a pretty solid foreshadowing of what's to come.
No, I agree. I mean, we did say in our review of Full Gear that I think the FDR match is the one that they've had now was basically just a precursor of what's to come. I think what kind of maybe makes me think the one with Hangman and Page edges out a bit is just because of the story that they've been telling, like leading up to it and afterwards, has just still been one of the most gripping things throughout the year. And the fact that it's proof that you can have long-term storytelling still in wrestling and that it can serve a purpose and it can be done well, because I'm still itching to see what the eventual payoff will be for Hangman and Page.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be leading to Hangman winning eventually. You'd hope. Could be some curveballs here and there, but I see him winning. Maybe not next year, but maybe the year after against Omega. And the fact that they've had this match and they've had all this, you're gonna see it in the promo packages. Going forward, it's gonna be tremendous, and we're gonna see FTR doing a flip and losing their tag match going forward.
Yeah. It's going to be really good to see what's going to come out of it in the future. Jace, do you want to take us through your number 3 now?
Yeah, my number 3 is Team Extreme versus Edge and Christian versus the Dudley Boys. TLC 2 at WrestleMania X7.
Very fair, very fair.
Very good, very good.
What can you not say about this match? It's fun, it's brutal, it's the first time, second time a TLC match had been put on into, in my opinion, have eclipsed the first one at SummerSlam, is saying something. I think these 3 teams, I think if it wasn't for these 3 teams, the tag division during the Attitude Era and into the Ruthless Aggression Era would have been very lackluster. Just saw the chemistry between them, and with Jeff having to fix a ladder mid-match, just saw Christian didn't end up falling, is just a testament to how much they cared about each other as well.
Yep, absolutely. No, I mean, what can you really say about this match? It's kind of the match that everyone knows about, but rightfully so. It's this match that's still played in promo packages for TLC or for WrestleMania, and it will probably remain that way for years to come. It's just insane because it's one of those matches that it's just from start to finish is just full force and it just never lets up, and it's just crazy because nearly everything that happens in this match is just an iconic moment. You're talking about the spear from the top of the ladder. You're talking the big bump Matt and Bubba Ray take right at the very end through a stack of tables. There's even stuff like the run-ins as well. It's everything in this match is just kind of a snapshot of an iconic moment. You could literally freeze frame and be on something that's stands out.
Yeah, I mean when you are part of not only a group of matches that are this iconic, but when you're a part of a match that becomes a pay-per-view, something that is so good that it has to be done yearly, which personally I hate. I would much rather they just did TLCs as and when it was for the story, but but when you're that good that you leave such a lasting legacy, and like you say in the promo packages and everything, you're obviously doing something right.
No, I agreed. I mean, I'm with you. I hate the fact that it's now a monthly pay-per-view, but I think the thing is as well, like this match was still a relatively new concept. I mean, this was like the second ever one, and then it's kind of been the bar that no one's ever been able to reach, and it probably never should. It's just such a perfect match that I don't think anyone could ever really surpass it, and I don't really think anyone ever should, because that is basically their legacy. Like, they were the three teams that basically defined the Attitude Era, and even a little bit into the Ruthless Aggression. And I think it's fair to say they're just responsible for being such a big influence on a lot of the teams that you see in today's wrestling as well. Like, without them, I don't think the landscape would be anywhere the way it is at the moment.
Oh, definitely not. But it's like, with this TLC match, obviously they brought it about in the first one, but it was like, obviously we all know it's because Edge and Christian loved giving people the concerto. Matt and Jeff jumping off the ladders, the Dudleys putting people through tables. I think it was just fortuitous that they all had their thing, and I think that's what made it good, what made it so good, because you were always expecting, like, people's going through tables, Dudleys are putting them through tables, Edge and Christian's hitting people with chairs, the Hardys are going mental with ladders. And even though everyone was expecting it, they found a way to just exceed expectations. During both TLC matches, they had as a triple threat. But I think this one, because it had that WrestleMania feel, obviously it was at WrestleMania, but in that WrestleMania moment, and it was part of, I think, most people's favorite ever WrestleMania. X7.
Oh, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
I think the match in itself is just one of the big, like, gems, and the reason why that's the best WrestleMania of all time. I mean, we'll probably come to it as its own thing later down the line, because it is, like, the best WrestleMania. But yeah, I mean, that match in particular is one of the reasons why it does particularly stand out.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Greg, what's your number 3?
So my number 3, as was kind of hinted at in the honourable mentions there from Garrod, is Mustache Mountain versus Undisputed Era from NXT. This was just on, like, the main program NXT, because this was part, I think, like, the second in, like, 3 matches that they had. So going into it, Mustache Mountain had literally just won the NXT tag belts from Undisputed Era a couple of nights prior, when they did the second UK title tournament. That was a great match in itself, but this one was just like absolutely ridiculous. So it's mainly just because it's a match that tells such a good story, and it does it in just 20 minutes. So the match starts, and it, like, Mustache Mountain, like a house of fire, like, sort of like dominating over the Disputed Era, but then Trent gets his knee wrecked. I believe it's possibly Roderick basically drops his knee onto the ring apron, and then from there the whole match is just centered around the fact that Trent's injured, and Undisputed Era are basically pulling out all the tag team tricks that they can to make sure he can't get the tag to Tyler. So he's constantly locked in submissions, they're constantly knee bars. It just keeps building to, like, him never getting the hot tag. But then Tyler eventually does, and it's like the kind of standard thing. He just kind of shows why he is going to be the future of this business. Just like Tyler Bate, what can you say about it? He's just such an amazing talent. And then it's just the way they build the story. So you see Trent getting tended to by the doctor, and then he's like up on the apron again, saying he wants to be in, but Tyler's hesitant because he can see his partner's injured, so he's just trying to carry the team. And then by a pure accidental bump, Trent gets in again, and then it just kind of dissolves from there. He gets locked in another knee bar, and it's just the pure emotion you can see between the two of them, where Tyler basically goes to throw in the towel and Trent has to basically tell him not to do it. And of course, eventually Tyler kind of does it, and it's sort of that interesting story where you see a team where they care about one another, and it's not just about winning gold. Like, Tyler sees more of the value in his partner than actually retaining the belts.
Yeah.
This match, I remember watching their match at the second night of the title tournament, seeing that match, seeing Mustache Mountain win the belt, which I didn't see happening. I didn't see a team from NXT UK winning the quote-unquote main NXT tag belts. Mm-hmm. But then when they did, I thought, oh my god, this is fantastic. then when I heard they were doing the rematch, I thought, heck, are they going to be able to top it? And not only did they top it, but they topped it in a way that, I think this is the thing with Triple H, the consistent storytelling. Because it's still selling injuries that they sustained in that first match, and just carried it on, just building it and building it. And like you said, just the anticipation of Tyler Bate getting that hot tag, like even just sitting at home, you could feel the crowd just ready for it, just building and building. I think if they'd left it any longer, the crowd's heads would have exploded.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's the thing. Like, it's crazy that this is just a 20-minute match, because there's just so many elements into it that you could just break down. Like, the crowd especially, it's one of the greatest crowd action I've seen, because they really do get behind. So when the match starts, there is kind of a mix. It's like half and half. There's the cheers for Mustache Mountain, there's the cheers for Undisputed Era, but the crowd really do feed into the emotion, especially with Trent just trying to get the hot tag, and then the very end there, where Tyler's just holding the towel above his head, unsure of what to do, and I think even the crowd are basically asking him not to do it, and I think some might even be split with him, like, saying to do it. So the emotion and the storytelling in this match is just off the scale. It's incredible. And as Garrod pointed out there, it's one of the few NXT matches that gained a 5-star rating from Meltzer. And the fact it was just on main program NXT as well is just kind of ridiculous to see from this kind of match. Garrod, do you have anything to say on it, given you had it as an honourable mention?
Yeah, I mean, I fucking love British Strong Style, Mustache Mountain. I was there at Blackpool to watch their match against Grizzled Young Vets, and obviously been them a few times at multiple other shows. They're tremendous. I think that Undisputed Era have sort of cemented themselves as just such a bloody good team, you know.
Yeah.
And they've seen it. Like they've pretty much dominated the tag division and just dominated NXT as a whole. But putting them together was just a little stroke of genius, and it was two tremendous tag teams, and you don't really see the towel being thrown in thing much anymore, which I think was good in a sense, you know. It coming out on this. I mean, you know, they do carry towels to the ring, very old school of them.
I think that's why it's a clever angle, because they're using something that the audience would just see as, it's just, you know, part of their entrance, you know what I mean? They've just got the towels, they whip them on the ring ropes, but they've actually used that prop, and in such it was basically just bringing back an old school concept and like making it seem fresh again, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. Like, Mustache Mountain's been one of my favorite teams for a while now. I feel like we've not seen their full potential in things like NXT yet, if that makes sense, because it feels like they've never fully known what to do, because at some points they've got done with them, and it looks like they're leaning towards doing British Strong Style as a stable, but then they separate, then they end up taking done away from them again, and then both Trent and Tyler have kind of had singles runs, and then they occasionally go back together to be a tag team. I just feel like with this title win, I thought we were going to see like a decent run out of them.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it was a little bit good that they lost, but then the way that they did it and the story that they told, I could honestly say I wasn't too good in the end, because it is just such a good match.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where, because the first NXT War Games was a 3-team thing, right? It was Undisputed Era, Roderick Strong and Authors of Pain, and Sanity. And I think it may have been the year after that. Was that the year after it was done, right?
Yeah, so it was Dunn, Ricochet, the Viking Raiders against all of Undisputed Era.
There was a point around then, and I think maybe even the year after, where I was very hopeful that they'd go back to maybe a 3-on-3, a 3-team thing, where it would be a British Strong Style, because we haven't really seen British Strong Style as a stable, you know, to the extent that they can be. Obviously they have on the indies and all these places. I think that hopefully we get something like that. I think it would be great. Yeah, I mean, it would probably just be saved for more NXT UK stuff. But they're so good that they could really, if given the chance, they could branch out to main NXT and even to the, to SmackDown and Raw.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if they did bring British Strong Style, we need to see it as like the heel British Strong Style as well, because as mentioned, one of my honorable mentions was their match against Ring Camp for Progress, and I rewatched that thinking it was nearly going to make the list, but the heel work they did in the Indies was so good. I mean, at the time they did the Ring Camp match, it was not long after the UK title tournament, so they're starting to get more of a spotlight. Yeah. But the Progress crowd are absolutely booing the crap out of them, and what they do is they just play up to the fact that they are WWE guys now, because for a long while they would come out, but then they would do, all three of them would do the Triple H water spit as like a knowing nod that like, yeah, we are in bed with WWE, what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Really good. But yeah, I mean, I hope we'll see more out. We'll see them properly together again, but if not, I'm hoping we'll just see all three of them do really well, because they're all just absolutely amazing talents. Alright, Garrod, do you want to take us through your number 2?
I do indeed. This was in fact one of Jace's guilty pleasures, honourable mentions, whatever we're calling it. And I suppose maybe even for some people this might be viewed as a guilty pleasure match if you're not a fan of the Shield. But my number 2 is Cody and Goldust versus the Shield at Battlegrounds 2013. It was fucking great. I love this match. Only about 13 minutes long. It really was all it needed to be. It was concise. It was to the point. Told a great story. Like you were saying, Dusty's career was on the line. He was also ringside. I suppose it's one of those tales of a tag team that isn't technically a tag team tagging. But they're brothers, so you kind of forgive it,
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about how the Shield, just how good they were as a team, and Jesus, like they were so good. I think in the match it was Rollins and Reigns, and Reigns is so fucking... He's great at selling. He sold for Goldust so well. He sold for Cody. Great. I think Cody hit, my favourite... what's the Insiguri he does off the ropes? The disaster kick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He hit, I think, my favourite one of all time on Reigns during that match. Absolutely tremendous. God, there's a point where... they have a stare down, all three men against all three men. Dusty takes off his belt and he's winding up for the elbow, and just every single person in that match is doing absolutely tremendous work.
Yeah, for me, just having Dusty there on the outside just added so much, because you can't not love Dusty Rhodes. You can't. It's not possible. And just to have him there and see him like wind up for the elbow, you're just like, oh my god, like it really is Dusty. Because this is after he'd lost all the weight, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he didn't look like the Dusty everyone thinks of. You're like, oh my god, it actually is Dusty. And again, like you say, have his career on the line, and have his sons fighting for it. Just made it all the more special.
Yeah. One of the best things in tag matching is hot tags. Or someone crawling for a tag. That's just one of the easiest bits of storytelling in tag team wrestling is that a heel cutting someone off before they can tag, and just getting the crowd to yearn for that person to be tagged in. And I think it was Dusty, he's crawling. Rollins cuts him off, finally fights off Rollins. Rollins quickly tags in Reigns just as Dusty's about to get to... just as Dustin is about to get to Cody. He power slams... Because he's got one of the best power slams in the biz, Goldust has. And I think he power slams Reigns, and then finally gets the tag. It's just beautiful, man.
Yeah. Considering they hadn't tagged together, I don't think they tagged together in WWE. and just to have that purely because they're brothers, even though there's quite an age gap, they just had that chemistry just to be able to go out and do it. Like, you'd think they'd been a tag team for years with just the chemistry and being able to feed off each other, and it just made the match so special just to have these brothers tagging together for possibly the first time to defend their father.
I mean, I guess, like I kind of hinted at, I've not seen this one, but I think from the sounds of it, it's going to be high on the priority to check out. For my own peace of mind, I'm guessing this is like long before he was Stardust, right?
Yes.
I don't think it's long before. I think it's...
No,
So it
I
wasn't
think
that long afterwards then.
Yeah, because they actually became a tag team after this, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then, not long after, Stardust was born.
And we don't talk about that.
We don't talk about Stardust.
You said we wouldn't speak of Canada. Lovely. No, like I say, I think it's one I definitely need to get onto, so I think that'll be high on my list.
It's an easy watch as well, only about 14 minutes. Pretty concise. You can whack that out on a commute or something, you know, little bus to work.
Where do I have to commute?
Yeah, there you go.
I will watch it while I'm at work because I basically don't do anything at the moment. Lovely. Jace, do you want to take us through number 2?
Yeah, mine's already been said. It's The Shield versus the Wyatt family.
Well, hey.
For full details, see previously in the podcast.
I mean, yeah, like I said, we already kind of went into a lot of it at length there,
Yeah.
but it's just a terrific match. I mean, it kind of showcases. I'd say probably when both teams were sort of at their peak, because again, it wasn't long after that the Shield had maybe a couple of months before they dissolved, and then the Wyatt family just went through a whole mess as well. Because again, it was after that, it was the Mania match with Cena, which kind of buried Bray and the family a little bit. But I mean, I suppose eventually it did all lead into some pretty good things. Anything you would like? Anything else you want to add to it?
No, just that I wish we'd got a series of those matches rather than just the one and done.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? It wasn't literally just this one match. Like, I've seen out of my head that there maybe might have been another one, but I'm not sure. I mean, this is the one that stands out for sure.
I don't think there was. I think because this was at the Elimination Chamber, and then that was straight into WrestleMania, where
Yeah.
you said they had the match with the New Age Outlaws. So I think there was only the one. There might have been like other matches of like maybe 2 of the Shield and 2 of the Wyatts, but I don't think there was another match with all 3 against all 3.
Yeah, I mean, because it was the big thing that when the Shield did split up, at least all 3 of the members feuded with Bray at one point. So
Yeah.
they're basically like, it's basically a group of people that have been intertwined. But I think we're right. I think it is just literally this one match, which, again, I think to be fair, like it was kind of perfect. It was like, again, a showcase of two of the best stables that WWE's ever had, and then they basically knocked it out the park with this one match. To be fair.
Yeah. I think the only thing was that the only downside of that match, and it's nothing to do with the match, it's that the Wyatt family sort of fizzled out a bit after this, even though showcasing how good all 3 members are.
Yeah, again, I think it was just a situation of, because the Wyatts were red hot, and I'm pretty sure it was because of that, because that was the thing, they went into the feud with Cena for Mania, and I think everyone was hoping, well, what it should have been the showcase that really put Bray over as like this next big player, but then if I'm right, Cena basically did beat him, and that just really hindered the character for a bit. And then after that, the Wyatt history is so weird, because I mean, they basically split the team up, but then got back together again for a bit, and then it was split up again. And I mean, I suppose it worked out in the long run, because Bray's obviously killing it now with the Fiend character, and like I say, Luke Harper's managed to shed his skin as just being like a talent who was not looked on fondly in WWE and is now one of the best things on AEW Dynamite. And it remains to be seen about Eric Rowan, who's not really done anything since he was let go this year. Oh well, no, it's still a great match. So
Yeah.
moving on to my number 2, it was Edge and Christian versus the Dudleys versus the Hardys, TLC 2 from WrestleMania 17. Again, like we've already kind of covered this, like see previous choice, but what else can you say? You know, it's such a defining match. It was essentially, this would be one of the first matches I ever saw as well, because like we discussed in the first pod, I got into wrestling around the end of 2000, and it was just such a hotbed of pay-per-views. And then the fact that this is one of the first matches I saw, it's kind of little wonder I've remained a devout wrestling fan since. It's also a match that I just don't think you can ever get sick of. You know what I mean? Like I think even for people who've got like a list of their all-time favorite matches, there's some matches you don't go back to a lot. Whereas this one, you can watch it over and over again, and you'll always pick up on something that you've either didn't notice before or something that you forgot about because of just how much just occurs in this match. It's just fair enough. It is an absolute spot fest, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with that because it was kind of very new for the time. It was something that we hadn't seen before. And again, they just set the bar so high, it's just not been able to be surpassed since. What I found was interesting about this was, I can't remember if it might have been the third one. Did you guys know there was a TLC 3 later on that year on a SmackDown, but it also included Benoit and Jericho?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Me neither. I totally forgot that was a thing. So that might be something I have to go back to. But yeah, I completely forgot. Because I remember Jericho and Benoit were tagging because it was because it was a month after this, they had the great tag match with the 2-man power trip, which is where... Because that's a great match in itself, but everyone obviously only remembers it because it's when Triple H completely wrecked his tricep.
I thought it was his calves.
Calf. Was it his calf? I thought it was his tricep.
Yeah, because he was in the walls of Jericho on the table. On the
Yeah, no,
announce
but
table.
he wrecks it before that. It's literally, he goes to... It's either he breaks up a pin or a submission attempt, and all he literally does is he just kind of falls over, but he must have fell wrong. And I'm pretty sure it is the thing where if you pause the footage, you can see the muscle basically like run up his leg. You can see the ripple because of how much he tore it, and then amazingly he just gets back up and limps and lets Jericho do that spot on the table. Like, luckily that's kind of where the match ends, but it's still kind of ridiculous to see Triple H's grit and determination just to get through that match, despite the fact he probably shouldn't have been walking.
No, should not have been walking.
Definitely not. But yeah, TLC 2, what can you say? It's absolutely tremendous. Just phenomenal. Garrod, do you want to take us into the number 1 then?
I will indeed. My number 1 match of all time, and I'll go on a quick tangent, and I'm sure you'd all agree. Obviously, we're products of our time. We're all similar-ish ages. I mean, I'm 24 now. How old are you guys?
27.
27.
You know, like there's really not too much between us. That our wrestling may differ by a little bit, but what I've seen is most likely, I was on the tail end of the VHSs, so I probably saw a lot of the same VHSs that you did as well.
Yeah.
But the amount of wrestling, and obviously now we're talking about tag team wrestling, but tag team wrestling that's lost to the annals of history, or just isn't really easily accessible to us now, is very sad. We're lucky enough to have WWE Network with a lot of backlog and history, and we've obviously got a lot of other streaming places and great current live tag team wrestling. But I'm sure if we had the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of tag team wrestling, we'd easily find maybe a Midnight Express match or a goddamn like a territories match from back in the day that would satiate us far better than the wrestling does now. But we don't have those right now. So my top, and I think it would still be my favorite match of all time, even if I did have access to all wrestling in history, is the Golden Lovers versus the Young Style of 2018. And you two must have seen this match. Of course, it is the best match of all time, so you must have seen this match.
Well, I have seen it, but only very recently, as you know, because you have mentioned this match quite a lot since we've been friends, and it was only recently I finally got around to check it out. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a tremendous match. Jace, have you seen it?
I have seen it, but not for a long time. I think I saw it a couple of days after it actually happened, and I think that's the only time I've seen it. But again, like, phenomenal match. Like, just all the talent involved. Like, possibly, arguably the best tag team in the world with the Young Bucks. And then Kenny and, is it Naito?
Kota Ibushi.
Kota Ibushi. Two of the best singles wrestlers in the world, arguably. Not even arguably with Kenny Omega. He's just phenomenal match. Great storytelling. Like, it's one of them that I will have to go back and rewatch.
It's a match that I've watched many times myself. I watched it right away after I'd watched it the first time. If you talk about long-term storytelling, you know, the Golden Lovers are... They're now we're in an age where there are multiple YouTube videos and even a few TV documentaries on Kenny and on his history. And the Golden Lovers is one of the best stories in wrestling. It's one of the best modern stories, and I think it is genuinely one of the best stories going on in wrestling right now. And it's not even finished. You know, it's one where it can span multiple years, multiple companies, you know, and multiple formats. You know, they're single stars, they're tag team wrestlers, they're doing all of these things, and when they reformed in New Japan, massive praise just all around, and it was something that everyone had wanted, and it's something that they'd teased in matches. I mean, there was one match way back when Kenny was in the Bullet Club, and he was, I believe he was ringside for AJ. It may have been Balor at the time, I forget. But anyway, it was the leader of the Bullet Club at the time against Kota Ibushi, and Kota Ibushi was essentially being, you know, beaten in the middle of the ring, and Kenny was just at ringside, and you could see like the facial expressions. This is years before they actually get back together and actually, you know, reconcile and become a tag team again. But just his hesitance and sadness in his face, and you just don't really get to see that in wrestling because, you know, it's just not. Storylines are forgotten when, you know, the SmackDown hacker or like, God, too many. I mean, Raw Underground, all of these things are just forgotten, unfortunately, and not well, some fortunately, but you know, this is a story that hasn't been forgotten and has been told in practically every match they've had, even when they're not together. And finally, they come back as a tag team, and they are against the Young Bucks, who themselves have such an incredibly storied history from, you know, back in TNA, all the way through Ring of Honor up to New Japan, and you know, they get a lot of flack from people like your Jim Cornettes and people like that don't see storytelling in their matches. They just see flips or whatever. But they are some of the best wrestling storytellers there are. A lot of the New Japan run of the Young Bucks, Matt was selling his back. I think I've mentioned that before. And that was a real focal point of this match. They were just kind of being out athleticismed by the Golden Lovers. Because you look at the two of them, and they're just absolute Greek gods of men. God, there was the one spot that sums up just how well it was put together and how well they sold, and the story was when Kota Ibushi was thrown to the outside, and the Young Bucks finish is the Meltzer driver, where one does a springboard to push the other one into a sort of a pile driver. Matt has Kenny in the middle of the ring, and he tries to lift him, but the back has been worn down and down and down, not just over the match, but over months and months of just it not being seen to, them wrestling through the pain, and he can't get him up. Nick is saying, like, come on, come on, come on. Kota goes to grab Nick. Nick kicks him away and then goes into the ring, gets behind Matt, and lifts him up into the position. You know, crowd is... The crowd doesn't even know who's... Because it's not really a face and a heel thing. Like, both of these teams kind of love each other, but they're still there to prove who's the best in the world. So they're cheering for kind of everything, and it's a strange dynamic. In wrestling, you believe that it needs to be a face and a heel, but it's just when you've told a story this well, you don't necessarily need it. Nick goes back to the outside, gets ready to do it. Finally, is about to jump up, and Kota grabs his legs, can't jump, and then power bombs him through the announce table, and it's just all of them are completely spent and practically collapse. It's amazing. I adore this match, and I could go on and on for hours. As I'm pretty sure I have now, looking at the time code.
I mean, well, this is what it's all about, you know. Like, I think, because like we've said before, like tag wrestling's both the kind of form of wrestling we both love the most, and when you make a pick like this, it's hard not to see why, because, like you said, like I hadn't obviously seen it before until like I was about a week or two ago now, but you really do feed into the emotion of the storyline as well. Was this kind of like was the story kind of going into it that was this kind of leading towards Kenny kind of eventually falling out of favor with the Bullet Club? Was he, because he was still technically with them, right, when this was going on?
No, he was kind of he'd stopped the Bullet Club from attacking Kota a few times, and that's when they started tagging. So he basically was out at this point, really, and it was when they were forming. This was like the forming of the Golden Elite, which was the pinnacle of the elite at the time, obviously, you know, including Kota Ibushi. But
yeah,
God, just even those just like him protecting Kota, I love it. It's so goddamn good.
It really is. Because like I didn't really know much of a history about the Golden Lovers until by chance I found it was clearly a documentary made for Canadian TV about
Omega Man.
It might have been that one, because it goes really into the history of the Golden Lovers, because they're like a team that's got a big connection with the LGBT, right? Because
they're sort of an ambiguously because there's not really, I wouldn't say it's a sexual relationship between the two, but there's you know a lot of affection between the two, and you know you could very much view it as sort of a gay storyline. And it's not something they've ever, you know, outwardly said, no, it's not that. We're just two great friends. They're just sort of like, it's up to your, you know, interpretation, and you know, it really does work as that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I thought was so fascinating about when I watched that documentary, that it had that connection with fans, and I think that's what one of the best things is about wrestling, but when you can find something like this to latch onto, and I feel like they've kind of obviously deliberately not gave a definitive answer to it just so they could please those fans, which is always a lovely thing to see. But yeah, I mean, again, two of the best teams there, and the match is just absolutely brilliant. It's definitely, I can definitely understand why it's your number one pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why one day, when either Ibushi goes to AEW or Kenny goes back to New Japan, that's where my eyes will be. Doesn't matter if WrestleMania is on at the same time. Doesn't matter if goddamn any other show is on. I will be watching that.
Absolutely. No, I think I'll be the same. I definitely want to see what they could be doing next with it. So we'll go into my number one, because you may have noticed, listeners, that Jace has gone very quiet. His laptop has decided to reset an update on him, and he's just given us the go-ahead to kind of wrap this up, because me and him had the same number one pick, he's told me. So
Windows 10, baby.
Windows 10, it's a fickle bitch. So yeah, but he's just messaged me there. Both me and him had the same pick, which is DIY versus the Revival, 2 out of 3 falls, NXT Takeover Toronto. So kind of interesting that we've essentially bookended the list with this, because given that was your first pick, and now it's both mine and Jace's last pick. But for me, it's kind of, if someone says like why do you love tag team wrestling, I would basically tell them to go watch this match. I think growing up, tag wrestling was always kind of the one thing I gravitated to, but I could never really give a definitive answer on my favorite form of wrestling. And then after watching this, it was like, this is why tag wrestling can be my favorite when it's done right, because that's the thing. A lot of tag wrestling just really isn't done the way it can be. But when I saw the Revival, it's like, see, that's how tag wrestling should be. They're like really smart in how they like schedule a match, if you like they do things that other tag teams won't do, and it's only just like, you know, little things, like the way they'll cut off a pin, or they'll cut off like another member from their team, you know, like they do stuff that you just don't see that much of anymore from a lot of tag teams. Like they really understand the psychology of it. And it was just the fact, like, this had such an amazing story going into it, of DIY just never quite being able to get there. And I think it speaks volumes for itself. I mean, that the ending of the match has just become one of those sort of, like, iconic images of both Revival locked in the submission and having to, like, clasp hands to try and not submit, but then both of them just have to eventually admit defeat and tap out at the same time. It's just a beautifully orchestrated match.
Yeah, 100%. It's almost it's almost heartbreaking that DIY broke up. I mean, they didn't begin as a tag team. They had their match in the Cruiserweight Classic and sort of were paired off after that, which is, you know, a great story in and of itself. They've done similar things where it's two wrestlers that just sort of have a chemistry fighting each other, so they're like, well, maybe we'll make this work as a team. A really decent one is Cesaro and Sheamus in their best of 7, then becoming the Bar, which I think were a tremendous tag team. But yeah, it's almost heartbreaking that they had to break up, but as they are, and as we spoke about earlier, 2 absolute goddamn standout stars that, you know, have led to probably one of the best heel characters of this generation, and just one of the best workhorses of a brand time after time in Johnny Gargano.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just crazy to see where, I mean, I remember watching this when obviously it happened live, and it still doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but when you look at the years since, where all 4 of these men are now, they are basically like the most talked about people in wrestling. They're the people you want to watch and see what they do next. And I feel like this was the match that kind of put them in that position. It certainly sort of signposted them as being 2 tremendous teams, and that NXT was essentially the place to go watch tag team wrestling at the time. I think obviously NXT still stands cut and shoulders above the main brand WWE for like tag team wrestling even now, even though I think at the moment it's in a bit of a lull period for the tag teams they've got, but it's still always going to be that thing. It was just like a natural thing. If you watch the Takeover event, chances are you were going to see a tag team match that was just going to knock your socks off, and this is kind of like the chief reason of why that was such a thing in NXT for such a long time.
Yeah. I mean, we're still in a pretty decent age of NXT, but that was a fucking golden age, you know.
It was the talent that they just had then when this was happening, because like NXT has always been a solid brand in my opinion, but there are points where there are lull periods just because people have been pillaged for the main roster, so they've kind of left them a bit barren. But the cool thing about NXT, and as we've said there, is you never know who's going to be the next breakout star, because as we've said, Gargano and Ciampa were just 2 kind of nobodies on NXT for the longest time, and then it was because of the Cruiserweight Classic, this feud, their tag team, that they just kind of got a rocket strapped to the back, and now again, like, they are just 2 of the biggest faces on that show at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, they're now two of the biggest faces on that brand, and FTR are arguably the best tag team in the world right now. So at least it worked out for the two, for the
Yeah.
four.
Yeah, no, massively. So, brilliant. I think that'll probably wrap things up here. So we hope you all enjoyed this different episode. I think everyone loves a good list episode, so we'll definitely be doing more down the line. Just to quickly wrap up there again, go check out our friend William Corley, who did our intro music, which will hopefully be on the beginning of this episode. Check out Spotify for Late Night Brain Freeze. You can find us on social media at the Bear Hug Club Podcast for Facebook, Bear Hug Pod Instagram, and Bear Hug Club on Twitter, and the Bear Hug Club Podcast for YouTube as well. Again, I'm going through the process of adding highlights and full podcast episodes on there, so if you want to go check us out, please do. And I think we're going to try and come up with some ideas for the YouTube channel, isn't that right, Garrod?
Yeah, we're going to come up with a few different plans here and there. We've had a request for some types of reviews and whatnot, but really we're just going to do what is fun. It's a very oversaturated market, so we're not here to become the next Talk is Jericho. We're here because we're just some big wrestling fans, and we want to talk about things like tag team wrestling and what makes it great.
100%. Again, the whole point of this podcast is we just want to talk about what we love, and we're just free mates who just want to have an excuse to get together and go really in depth on this and share it to people who do want to tune in to listen to us. So if you've been listening so far, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Later.